Okay, we're going to get started with the video recording now, so you're all now live on video. Not videotape anymore, but on camera. I'm going to call the meeting to order here at 10:02 and open the meeting. First part of how I'd like to run this meeting is, the first thing is I'd like to introduce all the people here. Some of you had the opportunity to meet Chris and Melissa prior to the meeting, but just so you know who all of us are up at the front of the room. I'm going to go through a few highlights of the project, then turn it over to Melissa to give some more details about the planned solar development, and then obviously have time for questions and answers. If I'm going through anything or Melissa's going through anything and you have a question at that time, feel free to raise it at any time, but we will certainly have the open discussion and question period after we get some overviews of the project. So we'll start off with introductions. I'm Kevin LaMontagne. I work for the Oswego County IDA. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the IDA.
I'm Yuri Tolt. I'm Chairman of the IDA.
Melissa Clark. I'm with Abundant Solar Power. We're the developer working on this project.
I'm Chris Carrick. I manage the energy program at the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board. We're a public agency that serves the 5 counties of Central New York.
And behind the camera, we have Evelyn Nahodi, who works for Operations Oswego County, which is a sister development agency with the IDA.
I wonder if Mike Treadwell retired that. Now I know.
Mike has not retired. No, he's unfortunately out of town these days, so he wasn't able to attend today. Oh yes, yep, he is absolutely.
Yeah.
So, no, he's got a lot of life left in him. So, I don't think retirement's on his plans. Okay. So we're here today to talk about the planned Abundant Solar Power LLC development here in the town of Albion. As you may know, it's an approximately 35-acre piece of property owned by the town of Richland. The planned development is just over 29 acres, which will be a 5-megawatt AC solar development, so basically a field of solar panels. Abundant Solar, as the developer, has applied to the Industrial Development Agency for benefits, including a pilot agreement, a payment in lieu of taxes agreement, and also sales tax exemption, which the IDA is entitled to bestow upon developers under certain regulations by state law. The pilot agreement provides, the pilot agreement has not yet been approved, but the pilot agreement would provide tax income or pilot income for the taxing jurisdictions of $3,500 per megawatt, and being a 5-megawatt development, that would be $17,500 annually. And what the IDA does with that money is, when we receive pilot payments, are paid once per year in March, and then we distribute the money from a pilot payment to the taxing jurisdictions based on the tax rates in the municipality. So based on the town of Albion's tax rates, the county's tax rates, and the school tax rates, we would divvy up that $17,500 to the different taxing jurisdictions and make a payment from the IDA to the 3 taxing jurisdictions. In addition to the $3,500 per megawatt, there's a 2% escalator. So every year, the pilot payment would increase by 2% to cover what we might see in tax rate increases over the 20-year period of the pilot agreement. The sales tax exemption is an exemption on the equipment purchase. Labor, of course, isn't taxable in New York State, but the equipment is taxable, and materials and supplies purchased for this project, only for this project. And in a solar development, a high percentage of the development cost is actually equipment, because of all the equipment getting put up on the ground, rather than where some other construction projects may have a higher labor component. Solar developments have a fairly high percentage of equipment costs. So that's the highlights, very general highlights of the project and of what Abundant Solar has applied to the IDA as far as benefits. So with that, my next plan is to turn it over to Melissa to give a little more technical overview of the project and exactly where things stand with the development. So Melissa, I'll leave that with you.
Great, thank you. We've been working on this project, or the concept of the project, with the town of Richland for a little over 2 years. You might be surprised to know. We were originally looking at another site at the well facility. We looked at a couple of different potential sites at that facility, and we couldn't get agreement on where we would would situate that. And after about a year and a half of effort and a lot of hand-wringing, this site came up for discussion. It's an open surface mine. It was coming to the end of life, and the town of Richland presented it as an opportunity for us to assess. So we did a high-level assessment. One of the things we do in that circumstance is look at the utility interconnection potential. We've done all that high-level assessment, and we managed to come to an agreement with the town of Richland for a straight commercial lease for the property. So we have signed a 25-year lease with the town of Richland. We have applied to the utility for an interconnection estimate. That's a bit of a long haul process. It takes anywhere between 3 and 6 months. It's a bit of a pay-to-play endeavor, so you actually have to pay in order to get a level of information back from the utility. So we are waiting to see whether the 5 megawatt AC, 7 megawatt DC site that we have proposed can be interconnected to the existing grid. And if so, what the requirements are for us as a developer to fund improvements to the grid to make that happen. So sometimes the utility will come back to us and say, the substation can't accommodate this level of input, but if you were to upgrade the substation at this cost, then the substation would be able to accept the power. Sometimes they come back to us and say, what we'd really like you to do is to upgrade the feeder lines to the substation and contribute to an overhaul of the substation. And it will be at this cost. So there is still a moment at some time in the future where we will get that feedback from the utility, and we'll have to make a financial decision about whether or not what they would like us to contribute to their infrastructure can actually support the project. But we're not in the solar business if we're not penultimate optimists, so we're being optimistic that we're going to see a positive outcome on that application. We're in a bit of a different circumstance here in the town of Albion, as I was explaining to some of your town board members earlier this morning, in that in most cases, we've been having discussions about the site with the town while we've been negotiating the lease for many months, if not years. So in this circumstance, because it's the town of Richland that owns the site, they've been immersed in getting to understand solar and community solar, which this site will be. So today we wanted folks to have the opportunity to get up to speed on what the positive outcomes to the community will be from this site. So we will be generating local green energy. The green energy then goes into the grid, the pre-existing grid, and it will actually supply energy to all the closest energy users to the production facility. We will, when we move to construction, also move to a subscription approach, where we will be going to folks who currently pay the local utility for their electricity. Will be going out to see if they would like to become subscribers to green energy at approximately 10% cost savings. So the upside is that you could be buying green energy, not carbon producing energy from another facility. You would be buying local energy, so there's a cost savings in terms of there's energy loss as you transmit energy through the wires. So by virtue of buying locally, there's actually a benefit and at a cost saving. The second financial benefit is obviously to the town of Richland, because we're paying them a lease payment for 25 years. And the third benefit that we're really here to give you visibility into today is the payment in lieu of taxes. So, rather than having an expired surface mine paying little to no tax, you'll have a productive green energy facility that will be paying into the pilot system, and then that money will get distributed to the local taxing jurisdictions. The array is state-of-the-art. It is very quiet. Our inverters are actually, it's a string inverter system, so there's no huge e-house like there would have been 10 years ago in a solar array that would have hummed kind of like a transformer. These string inverters are about the size of a Slim Jim air conditioner, and they make about the same noise as a modern refrigerator in your kitchen. And you know, by virtue of the 40-ish acres that this surrounds, there will be no ambient noise impact from this array, not even to the wildlife. So we will fence the array for security purposes, but small wildlife will be able to, you know, access it. Birds will still nest. All of that good naturally occurring stuff. It will just be protected really from the two-legged variety of animal. A number of you have taken away site plans. One of the interesting things to note is that these look fairly dense when you look at a picture of an array, but for the most part, due to shading, these have 16 feet between each array table. So there's actually more untouched land in the array than there is tables. The tables are, they start at about 3 feet off the ground and they top out at about 9 feet and they sit at about 26 degrees. These will be stationary tables, so they will not move, they'll be south facing. You heard we had a little chat about the weather earlier. We do all of our modeling based on 40 years of weather data that's geographic specific. So we're not coming to you and saying this is the theory of solar. We're talking about weather specific data right here. We know that it'll work. We know that we'll have snow. We don't anticipate a whole lot of productivity in the winter, although this winter would be better than most because we wouldn't have snow or ice coverage on panels. We model against actual weather data, and we know that 80% of our productivity comes in the shoulder, spring and fall, but principally in the summer seasons. And that interestingly offsets most of the peak, what we call it, peak power requirements in the state, which is when people want to turn on their air conditioners. And we have plants around the state that are called peaker plants that are typically gas-fired. They used to be coal-fired. They only get turned on to accommodate those peak requirements. The beauty of solar is that that's when we peak too. So this is taking private money to fund a peaker plant effectively that will take care of that peak load, and it'll do it with green power. So that's the Coles notes on what we would like to do here. Chris has been working on projects across the Central New York region with the Regional Planning and Development Board for 5 years now. We entered into discussions with the planning board 3 years ago, and we're working across 22 different jurisdictions right now on sites very similar to this. We're working on landfill reuse sites, we're working on brownfield, we're building some smaller sites on water well facilities where there's grassland surrounding a pump site where we can actually get a little solar array in that will offset smaller jurisdictions' energy needs. We're trying to fit in on the appropriate properties wherever we can. You're not alone in this learning curve. There are lots of other folks that are going through this and that will be hopefully experiencing the upsides to these small-scale solar arrays across Central New York.
Chris, do you have anything to add before we open it up for discussion?
I would just emphasize the point that Melissa just made. The reason why an agency like ours is involved with this is because we've worked with a number of municipalities, one on a case-by-case basis to install solar. And we thought there were good reasons to try to do this as a group, to try to facilitate this process, to get economies of scale and better pricing for the municipalities that are buying power from these arrays. But also to try to direct this development towards these types of brownfield sites. We're seeing a lot of solar developers interested in green spaces, open spaces, farm fields. Sometimes they're in, very critical view sheds or scenic highways. So we're looking for sites that make more sense, that don't have other productive uses for them, and we think this site fits that bill. And that's what we're doing here.
Great, thanks, both of you. So I'll open it up to questions or discussion. Any comments? We're gonna have-
Okay, Aaron Walter. First, I would question the fact that it was a brownfield site. It's a surface sand mine. And whoever owns the sand mine is obligated by the DEC to reclaim it when it's reached its useful life, which it has. So regardless of whether you were coming or not, the town of Richland had to reclaim that site this year. So it would be, I don't know exactly what the plan would have been, but it wouldn't have looked like a surface mine. It would look like a field or a piece of property that could be developed by anybody. Because there's, unlike a landfill or a brownfield or a well field, this does have useful life left in it after the mine is reclaimed. So I don't think that's it's not a pertinent point in this case. Another question. As part of this, you're not just asking for a pilot, you're asking for a UTEP to the established pilot agreement of 1997, 99, whenever it is. There's a set number of years that a pilot is established for a non-manufacturing facility, which is 10 years, but you're asking for 20 years. And there's a number of reasons that are given on the IDA, in the UTEP guidelines. I don't think this really applies to any of them. It's not as a benefit to the town, other than green power, but you can't say the green power is coming just to this town. We have a neighboring town directly to the south, Parrish, Williamstown. Other towns are gonna have benefit to the power usage, the green power. And don't get me wrong, I'm a proponent for solar power, I love it. I don't like being taken advantage of as a town by not getting property taxes. That's my particular problem with it. And then when there's an established guideline for a pilot agreement, to have a deviation from that pilot agreement doesn't seem to make any sense when you go down the list of items that are deviation requirements, or not requirements, but deviation guidelines. I don't think it really fits any of them. And I wonder if you could respond to that, either one of you, as the IDA.
Kevin, you wanna?
Yeah, I sure can. One of the reasons that solar developer, and this has come around to your question about giving a UTEP or a deviation to the UTEP. And UTEP is universal tax exempt policy. So we have the IDA or all IDAs in the state have a policy for giving, basically for granting pilot agreements. And you referenced the non-manufacturing. Non-manufacturing standard is 10 years. Manufacturing standard is 20 years, generally put within the UTEP guidelines, the tax exempt policy of the Oswego County IDA. So one of the reasons that we're entertaining the idea of granting this 20-year pilot agreement is that under New York State real property tax law, solar developments are property tax exempt for the value added of the solar development for 15 years. And so a solar company can go to and by New York law assert its rights under that real property tax law for 15 years of tax-free, which means the property would continue to pay tax at its current tax rate, which is just under $1,400 a year combined. And the development that Abundant Solar in this case would do would not incur any additional taxes. So the pilot, by having this pilot agreement, yes, it goes to 20 years rather than 15, which is based often by the life of the equipment or the financing arranged by the solar company. But what it does is it provides that tax income starting at $17,500 per year in year one of the project, escalating at 2% a year. Up by year 15, it's 23,000 a year and some change. So there's that benefit in those first 15 years of tax income through the pilot program, not directly in the tax bill, but through the pilot program that wouldn't otherwise be coming into the local taxing jurisdictions, the local municipalities. That's really the big reason that we're able under this to, working with the solar companies like this and working on the 20-year rather than the 15, we're able to get that tax income through the first 15 years, which based on the relatively new legislation passed in New York State is exempt otherwise. Did I state that correctly?
That's right.
Correct.
That's
Okay, thank you.
And I understand that, but I don't think your math quite works. Even if you just take the years 5 through 20, or 15 through 20,
Mhm.
the years when it couldn't have an exemption. It's an $8.2 million facility. $8.2 million equates to approximately $60,000 a year to the town of Albion. That's at just the current tax rate. So over 5 years, that'd be $300,000. You're asking us right now, if I understand, the 17.5 is school tax and county and town.
Right, yeah.
Okay,
Correct.
so the town's portion of that would be approximately $3,763 a year, roughly, with a 2% escalation. Okay, so over 20 years, let's round it up to 4,000, it'd be $80,000 total over 20 years, as opposed to the 300 we would get just with years 15 through 20. The math doesn't make any
The
sense.
300
for the
we
town.
get is just for the town's portion. I haven't worked
Yes,
on that math
yeah,
myself.
yeah.
Mhm.
It's
At the current tax rates.
the town's portion of the county property tax is 43%. So at $8.241 million,
Yeah, okay.
the town rate would be $60,419.47 a year. That's based on,
If it was an 8 million and something assessment, of course.
your letter says it's $8.2 million
That's the
investment.
investment, right,
Okay,
right.
so-
Whether that necessarily equates to the assessment, I can't say, but
But it's in the letter.
No.
that's the investment, that's the amount.
Okay.
It's a
that we-
depreciating asset,
Okay.
it's not an appreciating asset. So by the time we get to 20 years, it doesn't have that value.
Okay, so what value does it have at 15 years?
Some people would argue 0.
Okay, your side would argue 0, my side would argue different.
No, so it is in fact a reverse model on what you would be familiar with. It's not like we're building a building,
Right.
it would be appreciating in value. So I am not the CFO, but I would just say to you that we've had these discussions in other jurisdictions, and that the assumption that at 15 or 20 years, that the value will appreciate or even remain the same is not sustainable, and it's not in fact supported by any of the banks who are coming to the table with private money to finance the project.
Okay,
So, the simple reality is that this conversation gets really, really short if it's a full tax burden, because the projects just can't get built.
and I didn't say it would be a full tax burden. I think the IDA has the right, and the fiduciary right to issue pilots. But to issue a deviation from a pilot that's been established for 21 years, unless somebody can give me a reason specifically, it just doesn't make any sense. And no offense, but that reason doesn't hold any water with me. I mean, the math doesn't work. Taxes is all about
You're also,
math.
on an $8 million section, I agree that the facts don't work, but I'd be hard pressed to understand how this would be
Okay,
assessed at $8 million.
so what would be assessed at, 50% value?
I don't know.
At 50% value is
So
$150,000.
we depreciated in our financial models to 0 at year 16,
Then why do you need a pilot to year 20?
because we finance them over the longer period, as I was trying to explain to you earlier.
Okay,
So
Now, most,
I think there might be an answer to your question in terms of the deviation from the UTEP. The UTEP was set 21 years ago. We didn't have the same regulation driving the renewable energy vision in New York 21 years ago. So the UTEP has been updated, or the request for deviation is an attempt to update a 21-year-old policy to reflect a number of other regulations that are driving a completely new business model in the state of New York today.
But if, as Keith mentioned, if there's a new law that gives you the right to have no property taxes for 15 years, that updates the UTEP model. You don't need a separate UTEP deviation with the law that he mentioned. That gives you a 0% over 15 years. So why are we held to this? Why do you need a UTEP?
Well, what we need is a pilot, and financiers in the space are looking for a pilot to give them comfort in order to build the project.
Okay,
It sounds like you get the comfort. We, the taxpayers of the town of Albion, are not getting very much relating to it. If you're deviating, you're asking for 10, now you're going to 20, but it sounds like from 15 to 20, we're gonna get nothing, because you're going down to 0, but we're not going to be able to assess it. So that 15 to 20 is a 0 for you, that you're gonna get it down to 0. We're not gonna gain much value as a taxpayer, as a township.
It's
It
actually
seems like
not-
all the benefit is coming your way, not our way.
No, that's not the way the pilot would work. The pilot actually gives
Well,
the town.
pilots are very controversial to start with. The two gentlemen up there that they make it, and Mr. Treadwell, the chairman or whatever, you know, pilots, it seems like we've got enough pilots already in this township. It seems like you're asking for one, we got a Family Dollar that's asking for one. We got Tailwater with about 4 of them. How much more do you want the taxpayers to kind of eat before we gain some benefits from that?
Well, my point is you're actually gaining benefit and you're gaining a certainty of benefit through this agreement because you're having a 20-year agreement in place.
Yeah, but there's
So,
a basic
whether or
agreement
not-
gonna be for the town of Richland. Would you say they're the ones that are gaining the most benefit from it because it belongs to them?
Well, they're the property owner, so
Yeah,
they're getting the least.
I know, we're the ones in the middle here.
but we don't gain any tax. We don't gain any property tax.
We gain nothing.
You are gaining property tax through the pilot agreement, and you're gaining a certainty having a 20 years of a property tax payment through the pilot agreement.
Yep.
So whether or not the owner of the asset depreciates on their accounting books to 0 is irrelevant, because they are locked in to a certain payment that accrues to the benefit of the town.
For 20 years.
What's wrong with a 10-year pilot? Instead of going for 20, let's go for just 10. So that
This-
way
this
everybody
gets-
gains.
But this gets to what Melissa was saying, the way these projects are financed is with certainty of a long-term agreement.
And where's the
So-
financing coming from? With all due respect, is it state money? Is
No,
it a
it's
lot of
private.
that state,
Private.
federal?
It's
private
private,
money.
it's
Private
coming
money.
from a bank.
So these banks look at these types of projects similar
That's
to an annuity payment, right? There's a lot of capital investment up front, but unlike a gas plant or a coal plant, there's no fuel costs over time, right? So they have certainty of operating expenses because they're not paying for fuel costs. The pilot gives them certainty in terms of the property tax payment. So because they're not tremendously remunerative from a financing point of view, they're looking for a guaranteed return between 8 and 10%. That's the range. The only way that they can do that is by having all of the particulars in place for a set period of time.
It sounds so good, 8 and 10%. The common individual that has anything is lucky we're getting 2 to 3. These companies, when you're asking for so much, and you're asking for it out of Oswego County, we are all taxpayers within Oswego County. And where's most of the money coming from? It's either a state or Fed. And you say, wait a minute, the benefits it doesn't weigh anything into the town of Albion. It seems to weigh into the company that is promoting this. Now, I'm a National Grid employee retired, so I know what's going on with the company a little bit with basically, they're gonna put a substation, but you got 4 different townships, you don't produce enough in order to benefit the taxpayers within this area for renewable. We got hydros, we got 2 hydros, they're gonna give you more what you've got. And they're up the road 4 miles with a substation. You don't even have a substation in this area that's going to accommodate. You're gonna have to build one, or you're gonna have to get to the sub. And that's at Lower Venice Bridge. There is no other sub here unless you head to Plasky Parish, There's no sub.
That's the substation they'll be using, is Brookfield Energy.
Brookfield, sure.
Yeah.
So they're gonna have to go back, they're gonna send it back up there. Well, that line, a lot of that line goes 9 miles, or goes towards Camden.
Orwell.
You got a 34-5 line heading that way.
So we won't know the particulars until we get the engineering study back from that.
You're saying from National Grid.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, okay.
But what's happening statewide is that the utility companies, all the investor-owned utilities, are putting the brunt of the upgrade costs for our utility system that benefits everybody on the backs of community solar developers like Albion Solar. So the Public Service Commission has allowed the utilities to forego their responsibilities to maintain the infrastructure. And now the community solar developers.
I like that
being
word,
asked to
forego.
upgrade.
The Public Service Commission doesn't forego much of anything.
Well, that's a matter of
I
opinion.
went to a groundbreaking, solar energy up in Lewis County about a month ago. And, geez, the mayor there and everybody who's somebody up there was there, of course, and they were welcoming it and, wanting more solar energy put in. They said, they didn't say you had to buy green energy, but they told everybody at the groundbreaking ceremony that the electrical rate was gonna go down, not that they had to buy green.
Well, so
But-
in terms of benefits, this particular array will enable between 600 and 1,000 residents that are National Grid customers
500, 850.
to subscribe.
That's what the letter says, 500, 850.
Depends on how much each
We use-
subscriber.
I'm just saying what the letter
signs up
says.
for.
500, 850.
So somewhere in that range.
That ain't too many.
By virtue of subscribing to an array like this, they will be able to save 10% on their National Grid bills, roughly, more or less. Over the 25-year life of this system, we're estimating that those savings will at least be $4.5 billion.
You realize that National Grid, they turn around and basically, you're putting it on their lines, and they charge you for the wheeling rights. So once you get wheeling rights, that usually doesn't go down too much, you know.
Well, that's-
NIMO's
that's
gotta
not actually
maintain.
not- That's not how the community solar policy works.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm talking about the grid, they're gonna get you because they're gonna do the wheeling rights no matter which way you go. Whatever you put on their lines, it's gonna cost you. That's the wheeling.
Again, that's not how the community solar policy
Well,
works.
Your solar power, if you're going 450, 500 homes in 4 different townships around you, you wouldn't have enough to handle it, even at peak. That's why we got a hydro.
Well, we'll have to
We
see,
got 2
we'll
hydros.
have to see what the engineering report says.
Well, I'd like to see that
In
too.
terms of the
That
size
would
of
be great.
the array.
There seems to be a long way from, the IDA keeps getting further away from what they was,
Design.
invented for, industrial development agency, factories and so forth. That's what the pilot's originally was for, not getting into issues like this, because this is not industrial at all. I think our biggest problem with this, is we got, the 3 parties involved in it, usually it's just the landowner and you, and the municipality get the taxes. Here it happens to be owned by another municipality, that, it creates a problem here. And by the way, how many acres are you purchasing?
Leasing.
How many megawatts do you think you're gonna generate?
It's a 5 megawatt.
5 megawatt AC,
It
7
takes
megawatt
25
AC.
acres for 5 megawatts.
So,
I do know that.
it's under the table in the array is about 29 acres.
Like 29 acres for 5.
Includes the roadway and the
Yeah,
centralized.
Does anybody know offhand what the town of Richland pays for taxes a year on that property?
Yeah, I brought that with me.
It's $1,300 a year,
How much?
1,300.
Total for the school, town, and county?
No,
1,300.
Just
Current
town.
tax.
That
total
doesn't include
tax rate.
Just in the town?
County and town.
The county and town is, in 2019, I'm looking right off the county website, is 693, 692 and some change. And then the
692.76.
school is 663, which the total is.
13.
just-
Okay, I don't think there's any question that it's under assessed.
It's assessed at,
Good.
41,000.
You
41.
probably aren't at the liberty to tell us how much the town of Richland would be getting for a lease off that property.
25,000.
A year?
25,000 a year, and we're gonna get a paltry $3,000 in taxes a year.
3763.
And nothing, I know, town of Richland owns that property, but when you look at a property in the town of Richland, the neighbor didn't really want it in the town of Richland, and they kind of pushed it off to property they own somewhere else. I guess that's a question I have to ask.
Or the county, I mean, number one business in Oswego County is tourism, at least this part. I don't think there's any question of that. This facility is right next to a main snowmobile trail and a main four-wheeler trail. So to my eyes, it's right for development. If you leveled the property and put one house worth $200,000 on that property, you would exceed what we're getting paid under this pilot agreement.
Or a club, start another club or something.
Put 6 cans,
Sure, anything,
15 cans.
just for seasonal.
I think our biggest problem is we have Happy Valley, which takes up a lot of the town of Albion. We have all this county forestry that we get hardly nothing for taxes on. I'm sure we get something, but
State
not
tax
what
rate
it
up here,
would
we
be
get
if it
nothing
was a
in.
private residence. We have, down here, we have the old school, which they charge $10,000 for just to use their venue. And they're on a pilot program, and they're worth what, how much now? 12 mil or something?
I'm not sure off the top of my
I
head.
don't know, but I think that's,
How many pilots do they
I
have
think
down
we're
there?
getting,
3.
I think we're getting the raw end of the stick here in the town of Albion, because the taxpayers are gonna be asked to pay more and more, because the property never goes down in value. Every year when I get my taxes, they wanna raise my taxes again. Oh, your property's worth more, the people are paying more for the money. Well, now we're gonna be hung into something that we're gonna get $3,000 a year plus 2% every year, but that's not what we're paying. I mean, we just seem to be paying more and more and more and more. I don't see where it's such a benefit to the town of Albion to issue a pilot program to this.
The Richlands one is benefit.
Yeah.
They'll put it back on the well fields where they didn't want it, because for whatever reason. What was the reason they gave for not putting it on the well fields?
Please be straight.
They had, future planning concerns about where they would put new wellheads.
Everything is future. We don't know what the future holds.
The capacity of those wells is 4 million gallons. They're tapping in at 1.2, I think, 1.3. So unless they sign up 6 more towns, I don't think they're gonna have any problem with the well fields that they have right now. And it's 4 million gallons a day.
Who wants chlorinated water?
But that's a site that you couldn't develop to do anything else, because it's a well field. If they put it there, there's no other use that you could use for it. The property that we're talking about is 35 acres of untouched land. It's just had a bunch of sand taken out of it. And it has to be reclaimed by law.
They got all kinds of spot down there on 2A, they got a couple of big farm fields, it's got 25, 30 acres down there just before shoulder. You mean to tell me they can't get something down there? In the town of Richland besides? Let them have that all.
So we run into similar concerns and issues when we try to build on, farm-ready sites. Right? So,
Well, farm ready's not that bad, because the livestock can still feed around. I mean, there's sites,
No, because these facilities
there's
are
one in
fenced.
Oneida County right now. It's in a farm field, and the cows eat around the bottom of the solar array, guaranteed.
I haven't seen projects like that.
We-
Okay.
And down on
we
69,
do
like Kelly's
see
farm.
arrays where people
I've
bring,
seen sheep
sheep
on the
in,
floor, yeah.
open the gates,
Tolerated
put the
out.
sheep in, close the gates, but it's, another level of, maintenance and oversight requirement.
Understood.
Now with Brookfield, Energy there, the state won't help at all on building up the power in there so the solar companies can, hook into it, or is that gonna be between Brookfield and the solar companies?
So the Public Service Commission has provided some incentives for the investor-owned utilities to upgrade their own substations to accommodate the solar, but it's very selective and limited. And what we've seen is For example, there's a substation in Canastota where they did some upgrades, at the expense of all the ratepayers, of course, to attract solar development into that area, and we've seen a bit of a gold rush with developers kind of flocking to that area. So as soon as those opportunities are announced, they get snapped up.
Overwhelmed.
They get snapped pretty hard.
Well, the benefit to that is there's a clarity of cost, right? So in Canastota, we actually have a lease with the village of Canastota. They announced one of these utility-driven upgrades. We were in application and there was this gold rush, and we came out like 2 projects too late, right?
All capacity was
But the capacity was used, but it was clarity of cost that's appealing to the developer, right? When we apply in this circumstance, you know, we have no idea what the utility is going to come back and assess as required costs. Because we have no idea what level of degradation has occurred over the span of time. So there's ups and downs to that approach.
Well, the only way the deal can be sweetened, that is, with Richland, town of Richland paying more to the town of Albion or in Oswego County, school taxes, all 3 tax authorities. Because Richland's the one's making out like a bandit on this.
Or just not offer a UTEP on this project.
Excuse
It
me?
could be on, just not offer a deviation on this project. It could be on a different project.
Go back to the 10.
And then Richland could sell us that piece of land, we'll develop it ourselves.
Well, we should have had that before.
Like reclaim
Aaron,
first.
when you called me and suggested that there were other opportunities afoot, I picked up the phone and called Dan Tuckey,
Sure.
because I don't wanna be caught
No,
squeeze play.
I appreciate that.
And, you know.
Tailwater over
Well,
there, and then we can
you have
buy
to-
up.
you have to understand, I understand his response. The response you gave me was he couldn't find any other development opportunities that would pay as well, or be as lucrative, or however you wanna put it, which I agree with him. He's not gonna be able to sell that land for $675,000 to anybody. But if he sold it for $300,000 or $200,000 to somebody, we'd be gaining the same benefit as we're getting with this agreement. And it could take much more than a $200,000 development. I mean, there's snowmobile camps, there's lodges, you can do anything on it. And I don't see how it fits into the UTEP deviation guidelines. I just don't see it.
Now, like I said before, the IDA went a long way from when it was first,
Manufacturing and everything.
yeah. It was it was initiated for factories, that's in my mind what industrial development is.
certainly the
We're
roots
doing
of
pilots on the generation plants and even hotels, everything else. It's not industry.
Yeah, but who wants to do any industry up here?
And
That's the problem.
Can you talk about the life expectancy of the array,
Sure.
the actual,
Yeah, so, if I'd been talking to you 6 months ago, I would have been telling you that the panels were warranted for 25 years, but, that's just bumped up because of some technology improvements, so they're warranted for 30 years at this point, at least the grade A panels that we're looking at. And what that translates to, is that they will produce 80% of, the generation capability on the 30th year anniversary date that they will on the date that they're connected. So again, another layer of modeling that goes into our 25 to 35 year model. So we would expect at 30 years to see, 80% of the production that we're getting now. I was telling the gentleman earlier that we're seeing some of the first really large scale arrays coming offline in places like Spain right now. And they have they have much more engaged and sophisticated recycling programs over there than we have in North America, because we're just not there yet. But, they're getting to a point where they're not only recycling the panels, right, like ripping them apart, they're actually recycling the wafers that, they're glass basically. They're re-etching the wafers and reusing them. So we'll definitely, be using the existing array for 30 to 35 years. And then whether or not it's just a panel that gets replaced on the existing framework, or whether the whole thing might get replaced, or whether the town might decide that at that point, the property value was higher and they were gonna move on to something else, then that's their determination.
Whose responsibility would be at that point to take care of the array if the town decides something else?
It's ours, so we have a decommissioning planning requirement in our lease, and we have a decommissioning bond.
Are there, the array, is it made up of chemicals in there or just this glass?
No, these photovoltaic arrays, they're glass and the metal in the framing. Where you find some concerning chemicals is in the thin film that they're sometimes putting on the side of buildings now. They're here to the side of buildings. When those thin films burn, they do release some chemicals that are concerning. But these are very inert.
And then as far as the IDA, I'm curious, what's the timeline of the approval of the pilot?
Our next meeting is on Friday the 17th, so this is on the agenda for consideration of approval at that meeting. It's at 9 o'clock at the IDA offices in Oswego. Anyone would be welcome to attend. Most I understand will be in attendance. And of course, what happens after this public hearing is that a couple of representatives here from the IDA I'm going to document minutes. We have the recording these days starting this year. We'll present the comments, concerns, criticisms of the project that were discussed today to the IDA. So that's taken into consideration when considering. Gary, do you have anything to add on that process?
No, that's why I'm not really saying much, Aaron, which isn't usually like me. I'm listening,
Right,
listening to
right.
the concerns, I'm listening to everything going on. I do have a lot of questions in my mind that I would like to ask the residents here, and thank you very much for coming out and being so respectful, okay? We really appreciate that. But I'm here to listen. I want to come up with them because, I grew up between Mexico and Pulaski, so I know this area intimately. Snowmobiling, fishing, hunting, and everything. And I understand your concerns. I definitely do, even though I'm chairman of the IDA board, but also the gentleman that was talking about the IDA changing, we had to change over the years because, we don't have the businesses we had at one time. So we have to adapt and look at small businesses, at other industries, at, hotels, motels, anybody that wants to make an investment in Oswego County, we have to work with to make it work. And we've saved a lot of businesses in Oswego County, from nuclear plants to Novellis and everything that could have been very well moved. Hutamaki was on the verge of moving it to back to Kansas. We worked with them to make sure that I've been on the board for 21 years. And so we had to adapt. We had to do it. Maybe our description of the one time was just business or manufacturing, which I don't know what it originally was. All I know is we've worked with anybody that wants to do business in Oswego County to make it happen, and also to keep the businesses here that are here. We work with Brookfield Power, we work with everybody. And I know from, you work for National Grid, my wife worked for National Grid, she was in planning and development. I was in the trades for a lot of years. I worked with Niagara Mohawk and National Grid. The fees and everything, the application fees, the engineering fees and everything can be astronomical for setting up that power connection to the grid. So that's gonna be one of their main concerns. So there's a lot of things that go into this, a lot of costs, a lot of everything. And I guess, Aaron, one question I've got for you is, the site that you're gonna be leasing is 30 acres?
It's over 30 acres, but the
35.
portion that we're building.
So, I know what property values are where I live and stuff. I've got a 60-acre farm and other parcels that I'm selling that are prime, farmlands. What would something like this gravel bed go for on the open market?
I don't, again,
You said $300,000.
I'm just gonna emphasize it's not really a gravel bed because Richland has to reclaim it,
Well,
which means they have to cover it,
yeah,
grade it.
reclaimed,
reclaim.
Bring it back to the original.
Not just original, there's a plan somewhere.
Right.
and says
Gotta come back.
they have to do this.
Yeah, but you said $300,000.
If you were to build one house on it, a nice house, a $200,000 house, or a $300,000 house, the total value of the assessed property. Right now, the property is assessed for $41,000,
Mhm.
which for 35 acres is ridiculously low. And the reason, I'm gonna talk for our assessor, the reason it's so low is because it was a sand pit. But it's no longer
It was what, pardon
a
me?
sand pit.
I said,
Oh, okay.
It's no longer a sand pit. The sand is gone. They can't use it as that anymore, so they're looking to sell it. If you sold 35 acres on the open market, right like that, it's dry, it's not wooded, I don't know, 1,500 an acre just for bare land with no utilities. So,
Well, I think you're probably talking less than that. I'm looking at $1,000 an acre with utilities and everything, water.
I don't think so, not here.
How come
Around
we're taxed,
here.
how come we're taxed for it?
You wanna be our assessor?
With water?
No, it's, the assessment's based typically around here is $15,000 for the first 2 acres. And then it goes up from there depending on wetlands, woodlands,
Right.
usable property. This particular property is on the corner of the main snowmobile trail and Route 13. I mean, it's the main snowmobile and four-wheeler trail. It's the railroad bed and C5A, which goes to Happy Valley, Austin Road. Austin.
I know where that is, yeah.
But that's where we're talking about. And for a tourism point of view, it's prime for development of something to do with fishing, four-wheeling, snowmobiling. But it's just never been available. It's always been a sand pit until now. I don't know what it could be worth. Depends on what you put on it. We've got a little spot down on the river in Pineville. It's got, what is it, those little cabins, 8 little cabins
Maple Grove.
on 3 acres, 4 acres, sold for $675,000. So land around this immediate area is relatively high because we have a lot of out-of-state fishermen coming at the time. And a lot of tourism, which is out-of-state people as well. So there's a lot.
Thank you.
Here's something, yeah, with all due respect, remember when we had the Miller Brewery, that we had a 20-year pilot?
Yes,
And what happened after 20 years?
they were gone.
There you go. They took everything with them. We gave such a big break to them.
Now we
They
got
didn't do
nothing.
anything else with it. They moved to Ohio, that gave them another pilot for another 20-some years. They took all the machinery and everything out of there.
I'm sure that played a part in it, but there was other factors too, because I know the business reps and everything that worked at Miller's, and I know who was in charge there. And there was a lot of circumstances that led up to them moving and consolidating in Milwaukee. And unfortunately, we took that site over and we've repurposed it. And now it's generating great revenue for the town of Valney. We bought it, we worked very hard to repurpose that site. We even just recently bought the sewage treatment plant next door to repurpose that for county use. So that's
Did
part of
get
our
something from
agenda.
them. I took 3rd place in the last river race, so I got a trophy.
So, it did close down, but we tried to,
What are we doing with Nestle's over there? I mean, it's like anything else. All of a sudden, these people just decide to,
well, at one time, we had a company from the Ivory Coast that was gonna generate chocolate there. They actually got it just barely production, but then there was controversy in the Ivory Coast to shut down. Now the city of Fulton has it, and there's an Aldi's there. We're looking to repurpose other spots there
other
too,
areas in there.
so.
It's a good thing.
I think you'll see some good things come out of that site.
How
in
about
next 2
the
years.
brush? Who's gonna be in charge of keeping the brush down around the solar panels? Is that gonna be?
We're responsible for it.
Responsible.
And we subcontract that to local folks.
Yeah,
So there will be
okay, so
long-term
there'd be a
local
little
jobs.
bit of
Something
business there.
Just a question for thought. A lot of us, Aaron, a lot of us have grown up in this area. Just in the last few years, I cannot believe the Amish that's moved in Mexico, Pulaski, Richland. These solar panels gonna do any use from now? Cause all the old timers, especially me, I'm not gonna sell out. And the Amish will buy up that land. We got good land, they're gonna buy it. They want it. How well is those solar panels gonna produce for a township? I mean, it's happening. There's a lot of Amish coming from Ohio, Pennsylvania, that's up around this way.
If you're not there using power, instead, there's
The
not
power
people
will
there.
go on.
It'll go on the grid.
Yeah.
It'll go somewhere.
The next year.
That's
So
what
the
it's
grid is a balance of basic power and peak power. So the baseload power, it's actually the most technical aspect of the utility is to project that baseload requirement. And they need to be producing that 24/7, 365 for 100 years, right? And they need to project what their growth requirement is going to be. What we're doing here is we're actually producing power in the summer months that provides that peak power requirement when people have different needs, right? So we're not representing ourselves as baseload power folks at this juncture. When we get to affordable and efficient battery storage, we may be telling you a different story. Right now, the battery storage is technically available, but financially not so much. So right now, we're looking at providing power when the need is there on the grid.
I think what you're hearing there is we want more money.
I've received that message, yes.
How long has the IDA been aware of this particular project?
We signed our agreement in late September of last year.
With the IDA?
No, our agreement with
Okay.
Richland.
Okay,
I don't know exactly, Kevin, when that is,
okay.
I think
But if
probably
you-
One thing that
late
was
October or November.
a little bit disconcerting
Mid-November.
was the town of Albion's been aware of it for 18 days as of today. I received a letter from Mike Treadwell on December 28th, Saturday at 4 PM because it came registered, signature required. So obviously you've got New Year's Day in the middle there. We've known about this for very little time. And our constituents have had very little time to absorb or even review it. I mean, I think we've got a great turnout here today for the amount of time we've been given. And I think at the very least, we're due more time to review the situation and discuss it with our own citizens and constituents. So I don't know if you plan to act on the UTEP on Friday or not. But I don't think we've been afforded enough time.
Just one question, does the town of Albion have like a zoning or planning board
No.
to review these projects beforehand?
One thing I was mentioning to Melissa earlier was, we were never even notified that, usually when there's a seeker in place, all the municipalities get notified and somebody takes the lead in the seeker process. But everybody gets notified. Town of Albion's never been notified of this until December 28th at 4 PM. And there's already a seeker in place. So I don't know how that happened, but it has. And I don't think it's right. I think it feels to me like it's getting shoved down our throats.
The seeker is under, the IDA would be the lead agency. in this
But usually you have to
project.
request to be the lead agency. And you're supposed to consult with the actual municipality that the project is taking place in.
I'm not aware of that process, I'm just not familiar with that process.
You can't just take it. I mean, we're supposed to have the right to either say, no, we want to be the lead agency, or, there's supposed to be a process there.
Being the lead agency, right,
Right.
and secret, that's the lead agency.
In the
Right.
township, usually where you're at. The lack of communication on everybody's part, everybody.
Has
Not
the
enough
town assumed
notification.
lead agency for seeker for other projects?
We've at least been consulted on any project where there's been a seeker in our town. Like if the town of Mexico, as an adjacent town, has a project going on, and we're an adjacent town, they'll say, we're applying to be the lead agency on this. Same thing with Richland, it's what happens. And it just didn't. I don't know how IDA could take the lead agency status without even consulting with the town that it's in. Because we have the opportunity to ask for lead agency status. You can't just take it.
I can't answer that right now, I'll look into that though, before maybe on Friday for sure.
Is a major decision gonna be made on Friday, one way or the other, or are you gonna table it, or adjourn it, or? What is the projection that you're, trying to tell us up front here?
It will absolutely be discussed, I think.
Well, we understand that it's gonna be
Yeah,
discussed,
yeah.
no different than what's here.
Right.
Is a major decision gonna be made on Friday? That's what we wanna know.
Okay, you have a sense of that?
Well, we're gonna review all the comments and everything's here, will be discussed. I can't say, there will be passed, or all the resolutions be passed or not at that meeting. Because I can't speak for the board. I'm just one member of the board. So we're gonna take everything into consideration and go from there.
We'll certainly look into the seeker issue as well, if the step was missed. That's an issue.
It's over now.
No, it hasn't been, the
No.
seeker hasn't been approved yet. They've submitted it to the IDA.
But you've already designated the lead agency. That's what I'm talking about. That's the process that we would have been involved in.
And we should have more of a say because it is in the town of Albion, and I don't see where you guys can even give another pilot program to the tailwater down there without us being in on anything. I'm sorry, I just feel that it's undue hardship for the taxpayers of the town of Albion. Like I said before, we have a fish hatchery that belongs to the state of New York, and all the property along the river that the state of New York has bought, they may pay some tax on it, but not what it's worth. If it was in private hands, they'd be paying a heck of a lot more taxes on that property. We have Happy Valley, we have everything else. I just think it's a hardship for the taxpayers of the town of Albion.
They add it all up, but-
And every time we turn around, it's just more of a hardship.
Just jumping off what Frank said, I don't know how much you guys are aware, but all the property around the river, the Salmon River, was owned by National Grid, Niagara Mohawk, up until Route 2. Route 2, it reverted to private landowners on each side of the road. So the town of Richland, everywhere in the town of Richland, all the landowners own river rights. And the town of Albion were not afforded that luxury, because Niagara Mohawk owned it. And then the state took possession of it from Niagara Mohawk in trade for a pollution issue that took place in Buffalo. Had nothing to do with this area.
Well, there's a pollution right here in the,
I know.
on the river right down here off of the plant.
But how the state got that property was they took it. And same way National Grid, Niagara Mohawk got it in the 70s and 80s. They took it from the landowners because there was a flood risk. There's no more flood risk. So the DEC took it from National Grid. So now the town of Albion is not afforded the right to benefit from the riverfront
Private
access.
property owners aren't
So,
waterfront, they're not
right.
waterfront. Yeah.
We're at a detriment when it comes to property taxes.
4,600 acres just in Happy Valley.
Right.
In town of
Yeah, that's
Albion,
right.
off the road, really.
2 pieces of property were just taken over by the state that were National Grid, right on Tar Hill Road, the end of Tar Hill Road, and then as you go up the hill on Tar Hill Road. Both of those fields that were both farmed for years and years and years are now nothing but brush and 4 foot high, brown crap, and it's just totally unbelievable that that's what the state's gonna allow it to be, because now the state owns it. It was taxes were being paid by National Grid, but now they've turned it over to the state for some reason as such again. So there's more property that have been taken off the tax rolls.
Now, in all those cases, was the town of Albion afforded the opportunity to
No,
take possession of those properties?
No, not at all.
In a lot of cases, like the railroad beds and stuff like that, I know
Nope.
that they had the towns, the landowners adjacent to them and everything.
New York State
Reported
DEC was fining National Grid for an issue not in this area. I'm sure, almost positive it's Buffalo.
200 million or something like that.
In payment for that fine, they gave them all the property along the river, which wasn't theirs to really give, in my opinion, anyway, because they took it on eminent domain 30 years ago. But, no, the town of Albion was not afforded the chance to benefit.
All the, out on the Oswego River, all those nice areas that were put in, that's because of the situation of the pollution that came off the steamer, and there was a deal cut by the DEC, the state, and National Grid or Niagara Mohawk at the time, will do this, and they were afforded this instead of paying a big fine. It was, let's cut a deal, it's bottom line. And that's when Niagara Mohawk got rid of it. It is no different when the plants were going under, the nukes. They had to sell all the generation, all of it, in order to come up with certain, quote, monies from the PSC that were allowed. It just, it's nothing more than, it's not politics, but it's business. Big business. we don't wanna be on the short end of the stick. It's like, where do you draw the line here as a taxpayer? I mean, I have no problem with National Grid, I work for them, great company, but when things go wrong, accountability is a biggie. And then, what can we do for you in order to get out of this mess? And that's why half the river, it was supposed to be given back to the property owners. Anybody that was adjacent to that river had a chance to buy some of the property. And all of a sudden it says, no, sorry, we're gonna go all to the DEC's gonna have it all. And we, the landowners, guess what? We got the short end of the stick again. How many times do we have to get the short end of the stick as a taxpayer? That's what we want, is be treated fairly, just fairly, that's all.
At the time when Niagara Walk was, going out and National Grid was coming in, so my Niagara Walk didn't fight it, just give it in to them.
Yeah, well,
And then big fine.
yeah, and then the stockholders, we had to, we sat there as an employee, you know, about 10 years, everything, you got nothing. On your stocks, you got nothing, because they had to pay off everybody else. The only time we got it back is when the grid come in and they opened it up for about $18 a share, but we still got
I'm in the same
cost,
position.
see what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
And
we're just
I'm
saying we don't
not-
want the short end of the stick anymore,
See, I'm
please.
not familiar with the property transition along the river and that stuff right there, I don't
I'm
know.
just giving you the broader picture.
Yeah, no,
Sort of the
thank you.
point of this,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
getting your fair share.
Well, I would have liked to bought behind my home, but I got told, no. The next thing you know, they're out there surveying it, says, now we're gonna bring a walk trail behind my house. Wait a minute here. Come on.
Conservation is
Well,
See,
we lost property on my old farm through
Yeah.
easements from National Grid for a power line.
there you go.
Which, you know, what do you can't stand in the way of progress, I guess, you know, power's gotta get from point A to point B.
Mhm.
So, there's,
It's not what you know, it's who you know, bottom line. And I think you know it right here in Oswego County. I mean, let's get right to the point. You know, it depends on who you are, you get what you want.
Just a quick, don't really have to do this, but I remember sitting in June 1969 in history class, and our teacher said to us, said there's a lot of you guys sitting in this classroom, along with the ladies, he says, but there's an awful war going on, Vietnam War. He said some of you probably be in it, and some of you might not ever come back. He said if you do, make sure you buy land along the river. That was Dick Birch, Richard Birch.
They would have taken it from you then. You would have lost it anyway,
Yeah.
That's what I said.
unless you live in Richmond.
Meeting on Friday, it's a public meeting.
Yes, yeah, all the, yes.
How many members on the board?
some members.
Is there a place to find,
Graduated 69.
is there a website you can find the members, who the members are?
Right here.
Yeah, you can go on the Oswego County IDA website, Operations.
That's what that's
Oswego
from.
County, and, they'll list us and everything.
Any other questions, comments? I mean, I've taken notes, we have the video, but I think I've gotten some of the key themes that have been presented here. as well.
I think you know that we're a little upset. I think you could get that right up front.
Yeah,
With all due respect, I mean,
No, that's
I'm
bottom
one of
line.
those guys, I don't wanna pull no punches, and I don't think Aaron or Mike or anybody. It just,
You don't want, yeah.
And it's nothing
No,
against solar power.
nothing personal, that's nothing, yeah.
And again, I'm gonna go back to what I said before, you've expressed your opinions, you've expressed them respectfully. And I wanna thank you for that, because I've been to some meetings, like one of my first meetings in Oswego when NRG was cutting it, it was a madhouse there. So you guys did a great job, and we appreciate your concerns and your, you know, your opinions. And, is there any other questions or any other things?
I'd like
you'd
to throw this at you.
answer?
We built a hatchery down here about 30 years ago, and there was a lot of input like this, because they came here, they took a lot of farm down there, the old Cushy farm.
Mhm.
And it was so good, because the state comes and says, hey, look, we will, on a voluntary type basis, we will send you a check, and basically, in a little bit lieu of the taxes of what we got rid of, all the acreage. With all due respect, and this is about 30, 35 years, we're waiting for the first check. So, with all due respect, this is what it's all about.
Still in the mail?
As you know,
Well, it's like 40 years?
Yeah, 1980.
Well, I just look at it this way, we're still waiting for it because we felt that, you know, they sounded very good. It's like anything else, but come down to where the rubber meets the road. Like Aaron says, in the mail, or we're still waiting, so.
Well, I wish
With all
good
due
luck
respect.
for you, but if that don't go through, I got plenty of acreage for you. You can come see me and,
Right down the road.
there's no
No
hops and dops and,
Right.
and it's
We're gonna
closer to the power grid.
Maybe
We're gonna
selling
get
for
locked
50 cents an acre.
$3,000 and some odd cents, but our health and retirement for our town workers, that doesn't get held to a pilot program that we have, that goes up every year. And every year, that's why our taxes go up, because of the retirement and everything else. So we're being held to a bare minimum when that property probably could be sold for halfway decent money once it's reclaimed. And we could get more than that on taxes.
With the assessment, sure.
And that is why we have the 2% proposal of the 2% increase, but it doesn't change your point. But,
Right.
we do have an increase annually built in there.
I think in the end, it's clearly much more of a benefit for the town of Richland. And, it doesn't make sense to me. Like Aaron says, this could be property that could put you back on the tax rolls and benefit the town, benefit the schools. I think it's a big mistake to the idea.
I think everybody in here's got the same agreement, what we're thinking.
All right, any other comments or final points or questions? Thank you for that.
I think you took it quite well.
Well,
With all
it's
due
been a good,
respect.
thank you, yeah, I think it's been a good, it's been a great meeting, actually, we wanna get the feedback, so. Before I close the meeting, did everyone sign the attendance sheet? Okay, great, thank you, well, if no other further questions or comments, I'll bring the meeting to a close here. Thank you very much for attending, 11:13, thank you.
Can we shut the camera off so we can really tell them how we